Hare Krishna, devotees. Welcome to our fifth session of Bhakti Vaibhava seminar on Srimad Bhagavatam, second canto. And we are in the second chapter. It is the fifth day. We're in the second chapter, which is focusing more on the Supersoul. And we finished yesterday. We finished last time with verse 10 of the second chapter. So now we'll go on to verse 11. And it's all describing the beautiful Supersoul. First of all, though, let us begin with our prayers. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschachadeshtarne Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Okay, so here we go, devotees, verse 11. He is well decorated with an ornamental wreath about his waist and rings studded with valuable jewels on his fingers. His leglets, his bangles, his oiled hair curling with a bluish tint, and his beautiful smiling face are all very pleasing. Okay, so that's verse 11. Let's have a look at the purport. Short purport is there. So Srila Prabhupada explains that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the most beautiful person. No one can compare to him. So Srila Prabhupada explains that Shukadev Goswami is describing the Lord's beauty in detail, each part of his beauty, to teach the impersonalists that the Lord is not the imagination of the devotee just to facilitate worship. He's actually a person, a real person, the supreme person, in person. And what's the impersonal feature then? It's just his effulgence, as the sun's rays are radiations from the sun. So in that example, he's like the sun. The impersonal feature, the Brahmajyoti, is like the rays of the sun. And, Srila Prabhupada, we find, is going to do it in the next purport too. And it's not just the next purport, but it's just so often Prabhupada goes into some explanation of what's wrong with the impersonalists and their putting too much emphasis on the impersonal aspect. It exists. The impersonal aspect exists. It's not like it's just fictitious, but it's not the ultimate. The personal feature Well, they're the personal features. After the Brahmajyoti, the next is Paramatma, Super Soul, who is personal also. He's giving us personal guidance and intervening in our lives in so many ways to help us progress. So that's all very personal. And then there's the Bhagavan feature, which is Krishna in Goloka Vrindavan and like the Lord in Vaikuntha, like that. Yes, and there's a funny little story from, I think it's in the Leelamrita, Prabhupada Leelamrita, how Prabhupada was preaching in the very early days when they were in Second Avenue, and some young people were taking part and even living in the premises there and chanting and becoming devotees, but they're still really in the early stages. And there's a description that one day one of the very new devotees asked the others, well, why do you think Swamiji is always speaking so strongly against the impersonalists? Why? And one devotee suggested that, well, you know, he's an elderly man, and I think he may have had some bad experience with an impersonalist, and so he's got like a bee under his bonnet. Whenever there's mention of impersonalists or impersonalism, it brings back this memory of this bad experience he had, and he gets sort of excited about it. Little did they know that actually impersonalism it's such a dangerous thing. It's really dangerous. Okay, so let's carry on. Verse 12. The Lord's magnanimous pastimes and the glowing glancing of his smiling face are all indications of his extensive benedictions. One must therefore concentrate on this transcendental form of the Lord. As long as the mind can be fixed on him by meditation, you just focus on him as long, as much as you're able. So, yes, there's a purport here. And Prabhupada begins in the first paragraph. I mean, it's an extensive purport, actually. Prabhupada begins in the first paragraph by referring to Bhagavad Gita chapter 12, verse 5, Klesha di kataraste sham avyaktahi. Yeah, that for those people who try to focus on the unmanifest, impersonal form of the Lord. What is it? Avyaktahi gatir dukam. Yes, they struggle. They find it very difficult to focus on the impersonal feature. So therefore, Prabhupada makes the point, first point he makes in the purport, is that the impersonalists struggle in their impersonal meditation. But the devotee progresses very easily. Yes, because impersonalism, for us, we are persons. You know, of course, we're living as persons right now in this world, but we are actually persons. We're eternal spiritual persons. So to subdue and negate our real nature and what we're just used to being as persons, it's very difficult. But to be a person in Krishna consciousness and serving the Lord and doing so many things, singing and dancing and eating nice prasadam, doing some service and associating with nice people. The process of Krishna consciousness is really nice, and therefore it's so much easier. So therefore Prabhupada makes the point that this shows that the devotee has advantage over the impersonalists who don't accept form. So this verse then, Prabhupada explains, is emphasizing concentrating the mind on the real form of the Lord and not on some impersonal conception. Right, so on to the second paragraph. And, there's been mention of Jnana Yoga, which is generally more to do with impersonalism. Impersonal people are attracted to that. So, but what is described here is meditation and bhakti yoga. And when someone becomes free from materialism, one way or the other, either directly through association with devotees or through having done some jnana yoga, then that person can become a devotee and meditate on the Lord. So therefore, Prabhupada says, bhakti yoga includes jnana yoga. Bhakti serves the purpose of jnana. So one becomes liberated automatically if one does pure devotional service. Yes, so bhakti yoga includes jnana yoga because jnana means philosophy. We're not these bodies, separating ourselves from matter. And Krishna consciousness, bhakti yoga, does that as part of the overall program of developing love for Krishna, developing our relationship with Krishna. So we sit down for class, we sit down to chant japa, that's like hatha yoga. We study philosophy, that's like jnana yoga. And things like this we do, which are us utilizing these different yogas, but in bhakti yoga, the highest yoga. So therefore this stage of becoming free from all the nonsense, free from material conditions, this is called anatha nivritti in Krishna consciousness. That's anatha nivritti, nullifying the unwanted things. So when we meditate on the Lord, we need to get the result of becoming free from unwanted things, from material attachments. And Prabhupada makes the point, and for the rest of the purport, he gives quite a bit of attention to this point, that this includes particularly sex desire, which entangles one the most deeply and which encourages the development, stimulates the development of false ego. Yeah, I, me, and mine, then attraction for political, social engagements, these sorts of things. But really, bhakti yoga leads to evaporation, Prabhupada says, evaporation of sex desire. So we need to see, when we're trying to evaluate how we're doing in Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada says, one must see how much one is freed from sex desire. Yeah. So as a person who is feeling hungry, feels satisfied, and the hunger goes, each mouthful that he eats of food. So one must see the degree of freedom step by step from sex desire. Yes. So bhakti then, engagement in bhakti, engagement in devotional service, produces knowledge and renunciation. Vasudeva Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Janiyat Yasu Vairagyam Jnanam Cha Yadahaitakam. Bhagavatam, first canto, talks about that. So, even if a devotee is not well educated materially, but if the devotee is very nicely doing bhakti, then the devotee should be able to leave aside these unwanted things and should be able to see that these things are falling away and it's not causing a disturbance for me that they're falling away. So Shukadev is suggesting alternatives for the bare necessities of life. For example, he's mentioned clothes, pillows, etc. But he hasn't mentioned sex desire. He mentioned clothes, he mentioned pillows. He mentioned a bed, not having a bed, just lying on the ground. Different things he's mentioned that we can just do away with. But he hasn't mentioned sex desire, Prabhupada says. And Prabhupada makes the point, one who still has sex desire should not accept the renounced order of life. Hare Krishna. So Prabhupada concludes the paragraph by saying, so by the gradual process of devotional service under the guidance of a proper spiritual master and following the principles of the Bhagavatam, one must be able to at least control the gross sex desire before one accepts the renounced order of life factually. Yes, that's very important. So there's another paragraph actually. Yes, and Prabhupada begins the paragraph by saying, so purification means getting free gradually from sex desire. And this is attained by meditation on the person of the Lord, as described herein, beginning from the feet. Yeah, the Lord is a person. We have to get to know him on a personal level. It's so important, actually. And so purification means getting free gradually from sex desire, and this is attained by meditation on the person of the Lord, as described herein, beginning from the feet. So Prabhupada says, don't go above the feet unless you can see that sex desire is reduced. So the 10th canto is the smiling face of Krishna. But then many people just go to the 5 chapters on the rasa dance, but this is improper. They engage in sex life in the name of Srimad Bhagavatam, directly or indirectly. So then Srila Prabhupada makes the point that Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur clearly defines the import of purification as cessation from sex indulgence. So like this, Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur defines the import of purification as cessation from sex indulgence. As one becomes free, one can go forward to the next meditation on the higher limbs. So those who are still entrapped by sex indulgence should continue meditating on the feet, just the 1st and 2nd cantos of the Bhagavatam. So Prabhupada includes the purport by saying, one must complete the purificatory process by assimilating the contents of the first 9 cantos. Then one should be admitted into the realm of the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. 13. The process of meditation should begin from the lotus feet of the Lord and progress to his smiling face. The meditation should be concentrated upon the lotus feet, then the calves, then the thighs, and in this way higher and higher. The more the mind becomes fixed upon the different parts of the limbs, one after another, the more the intelligence becomes purified. So again, there's pretty substantial purport. So, Prabhupada makes the point that the Bhagavatam, Shukadev Goswami, recommends meditating not on something impersonal, but on the Lord. Either the universal form, or when one becomes a little more advanced through that, on the actual personal form with two hands playing the flute. So there are authorized descriptions and there are authorized deities. So one can practice meditating on the deities, beginning with the feet and gradually coming higher to the smiling face. Then the second paragraph. So according to the Bhagavat school, that's us, the smiling face is the rasa dance. So as stated here, one should gradually progress in this and not jump to the face. And of course, it's very good to offer flowers, to offer tulsi to the lotus feet. In this way, we become purified by archana, including dressing, bathing, etc. It all purifies our existence. If we do this, then we're going to reach the higher level and will eventually be able to relish the rasa dance. Then the third paragraph. The more one concentrates on the transcendental form of the Lord, either on the lotus feet, the calves, the thighs, or the chest, the more one becomes purified, Srila Prabhupada says. Then the verse itself talks about purifying the intelligence, which means becoming detached from sense gratification. In other words, impure intelligence is due to sense gratification. So the result of meditating on the form of the Lord will be detachment from sense gratification. In other words, that you notice that you start becoming independent of the material attractions. And Prabhupada says, therefore the ultimate purpose of meditation is purification of one's intelligence. So, the fourth paragraph, this is quite a purport. The fourth paragraph says that those who are too engrossed in sense gratification can't do archana or deity worship or touch the forms of Radha Krishna deities or Vishnu. For them, those people who are too engrossed in sense gratification, better to meditate on the universal form. So therefore, impersonalists, voidists, these people should meditate on the universal form, whereas devotees should meditate on the deities in the temple and do practical service. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, because the impersonalists and the voidists are not sufficiently purified in their spiritual activities, archana is not meant for them. Interesting. Text 14. Unless the gross materialist develops a sense of loving service unto the Supreme Lord, the seer of both the transcendental and material worlds, he should remember or meditate upon the universal form of the Lord at the end of his prescribed duties. So, okay, there's a paragraph here, purport. Let's have a look. So, okay. So Krishna is the seer of all the worlds, the beneficiary and enjoyer of all the worlds, as Bhagavad Gita 5.29 explains. And Prabhupada makes the point that the material world is not a fit place for living entities because we're spiritually one with the Lord. And in the material world, we become conditioned. We forget our relationship with the Lord. So therefore, we shouldn't stay in the material world. And Krishna wants us to come back. Unfortunately, we are not so serious about that. This is a point Prabhupada makes repeatedly in his purports. So we're not so serious due to being misguided. That's a major problem. Misguided, and our previous sins and virtues also. And Prabhupada makes the point, some virtuous people begin to establish a relationship with the Lord, but can't understand the personal feature. The impersonalist can't do devotional service, so better they meditate on the universal form. It's particularly for impersonalists or people who are just too materialistic, and as a result, they're not able to take the personal form of the Lord seriously. But some virtuous people, even in the very early stages, begin to reestablish their real relationship with the Lord. But they have difficulty understanding the personal feature. So it's a type of meditation on the absolute truth, meditating on the universal form. It's a type of meditation on the absolute truth. And by doing it, a person's qualities will improve and the world will become happy. So without these things happening, this world becomes hell. Okay, so now we go on to the third section, from verse 15 to verse 31, the yogi's departure from this world. And we have to read we will read the verses, the translations. O king, whenever the yogi desires to leave this planet of human beings, he should not be perplexed about the proper time or place, but should comfortably sit without being disturbed and regulating the life here should control the senses by the mind. Okay. Then verse 16, thereafter the yogi should merge his mind by his unalloyed intelligence into the living entity, and then merge the living entity into the super self. And by doing this, the fully satisfied living entity becomes situated in the supreme stage of satisfaction, so that he ceases from all other activities. 17. In that transcendental state of labdopashanti, there is no supremacy of devastating time, which controls even the celestial demigods, who are empowered to rule over mundane creatures. And what to speak of the demigods themselves? Nor is there the mode of material goodness, nor passion, nor ignorance, nor even the false ego, nor the material causal ocean, nor the material nature. All right. Verse 18, the transcendentalists desire to avoid everything godless, for they know that supreme situation in which everything is related with the Supreme Lord Vishnu. Therefore, a pure devotee who's in absolute harmony with the Lord does not create perplexities, but worships the lotus feet of the Lord at every moment, taking them into his heart. So, verse 19, by the strength of scientific knowledge, one should be well situated in absolute realization and thus be able to extinguish all material desires. One should then give up the material body by blocking the air hole through which stool is evacuated with the heel of one's foot, and by lifting the air, and by lifting the life air from one place to another in the 6 primary places. That's that Shat Chakra Yoga. Shat means 6. So the 6 chakras, those yogis must lift the life air from one to the next, finally to the top of the head. 20, the meditative devotee should slowly push up the life air from the navel to the heart, from there to the chest, and from there to the root of the palate. He should search out the proper places with intelligence. 21. Thereafter, the bhakti yogi should push the life air up between the eyebrows, and then, blocking the 7 outlets of the life air, he should maintain his aim for going back home, back to Godhead. If he is completely free from all desires for material enjoyment, he should then reach the cerebral hole and give up his material connections, having gone to the Supreme. 22. However, O King, if a yogi maintains a desire for improved material enjoyments, like transference to the topmost planet Brahmaloka, or the achievement of the 8-fold perfections, travel in outer space with the Vihayasas, or a situation in one of the millions of planets. So if the yogi has a desire for these things, then he has to take away with him the materially molded mind and senses. 23. The transcendentalists are concerned with the spiritual body. As such, by the strength of their devotional service, austerities, mystic power, and transcendental knowledge, their movements are restricted within and beyond the material worlds. The fruit of workers, or the gross materialists, can never move in such an unrestricted direction. In such an unrestricted manner. Verse 24. O King, when such a mystic passes over the Milky Way by the illuminating Sushumna, to reach the highest planet Brahmaloka, he first goes to Vaishvanara, the planet of the deity of fire, wherein he becomes completely cleansed of all contaminations. And therefore he still goes higher to the circle of Shishumara to relate with Lord Hari, the personality of Godhead. 25. This Shishumara is the pivot for the turning of the complete universe, and it is called the navel of Vishnu, Garbhodakshai Vishnu. The yogi alone goes beyond the circle of Shishumara and attains the planet Mahaloka, where purified saints like Bhrigu enjoy a duration of life for 4,300,000,000 solar years. This planet is worshipable even for the saints who are transcendentally situated. Okay, there's no purport there. So, verse 26, at the time of the final devastation of the complete universe, the end of the duration of Brahma's life, a flame of fire emanates from the mouth of Ananta, from the bottom of the universe. The yogi sees all the planets of the universe burning to ashes, and thus he leaves for Satyaloka by airplanes used by the great purified souls. The duration of life in Satyaloka calculated to be 15,480,000,000,000. In that planet of Satyaloka, there's neither bereavement nor old age nor death. There is no pain of any kind, and therefore there are no anxieties, save that sometimes, due to consciousness, there's a feeling of compassion for those unaware of the process of devotional service, who are subjected to unsurpassable miseries in the material world. Verse 28, after reaching Satyaloka, the devotee is specifically able to be incorporated fearlessly by the subtle body in an identity similar to that of the gross body, and one after another he gradually attains stages of existence from earthly to watery, fiery, glowing, and airy, until he reaches the ethereal stage. Verse 29. The first stratum of the covering is calculated to extend 80 million miles, and the subsequent coverings of the universe are respectively of fire, effulgence, air, and ether, one after another, each extending 10 times further than the previous. Verse 30, the devotee, thus surpassing the gross and subtle forms of coverings, enters the plane of egoism, and in that status, he merges the material modes of nature, ignorance and passion, in this point of neutralization, and thus reaches egoism in goodness. After this, all egoism is merged in the Mahatattva, and he comes to the point of pure self-realization. Oh, that's a major purport. Verse 31, only the purified soul can attain the perfection of associating with the personality of Godhead in complete bliss and satisfaction, not in his constitutional state. In complete bliss and satisfaction in his constitutional state. Whoever is able to renovate such devotional perfection is never again attracted by this material world, and he never returns. That's verse 31, another big purport. And that's the end of this section. There's some pretty serious purports here. Right, so okay, let's go through it in more detail. And the section which begins on with verse 15 and goes to verse 31 is titled, The Yogi's Departure from This World. Yeah, the yogi, not so much the devotee. So verse 15, O king, whenever the yogi desires to leave this planet of human beings, he should not be perplexed about the proper time or place, but should comfortably sit without being disturbed, and regulating the life air should control the senses by the mind. Right. So, of course, this reminds us, and Prabhupada mentions in the purport, of Bhagavad Gita chapter 8, particularly verses 23 to 26. Yeah. Which talk about leaving this world at different times, under different circumstances. But here, Shukadev Goswami says that ultimately the devotee doesn't need to worry about proper time or place. Yes, just get the Lord's mercy by rendering service. So such devotees can leave the body at any time, but mixed devotees who are materialistic or impersonal, they need to depart at the right time, and that's where the chapter 8 verses 23 to 26 come in. But this is not as important as becoming qualified to leave any time. That's really important. One must control the senses by the mind, engaging it at the lotus feet of the Lord, and then gradually the senses must become automatically engaged in devotional service. Verse 16, thereafter the yogi should merge his mind by his unalloyed intelligence into the living entity, and then merge the living entity into the super self. And by doing this, the fully satisfied living entity becomes situated in the supreme stage of satisfaction, so that he ceases from all other activities. Right, well, this is interesting. Yes. So the mind, there's thinking, feeling, and willing, but Prabhupada makes the point that let's see, what is it? Oh, oh gosh. The mind can act in two ways. The mind can act in two ways. If it's materially absorbed, it can act for material advancement of knowledge, which is destructive, ending in the discovery of nuclear weapons. But when the mind is under spiritual urge or attracted spiritually, then the mind acts wonderfully for going back home, back to Godhead. So therefore, Prabhupada makes the point, the mind has to be manipulated, or not manipulated, manipulated. Prabhupada uses the word. Basically means trained. The mind has to be trained by good and unalloyed intelligence, and that means to render service to the Lord. Yes. And one should see, Prabhupada makes the point, one should see how all living entities are serving. Yes. But the problem is, on the material level, that material service based on desire, anger, lust, etc., the mind is always unhappy. So therefore we have to turn our intelligence to inquire from the right sources about serving, and then get information about devotional service. And then we'll become happy in devotional service. So the Lord and his service are identical. There's no difference. So therefore, when unalloyed intelligence and the mind are merged into the Lord, Prabhupada says the living entity does not remain a seer himself, but becomes seen by the Lord transcendentally. This is a little subtle point. Prabhupada goes on about it further in this purport. When a living entity is seen by the Lord dictates to him to act according to his desire, the Lord's desire. And then the living entity stops doing other duties for just illusory satisfaction. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, in his pure unalloyed state, The living entity attains the stage of full bliss, Lubdho Pashanti, and ceases all material hankerings. 23. In that transcendental state of Lubdho Pashanti, there's no supremacy of devastating time, which controls even the celestial demigods, who are empowered to rule over mundane creatures. And what to speak of the demigods themselves? They're also ruled over by time. Nor is there the mode of material goodness, nor passion, nor ignorance, not even the false ego, nor the material causal ocean, nor the material nature. Well, that's pretty powerful. So Prabhupada goes on to say that time, as we know it particularly, devastating time, which controls the demigods and by past, present, future, etc., it doesn't act on the transcendental plane. And you may remember Brahma Samhita mentions transcendental time, which doesn't exist with past, present, and future. Yes, it's free from those things, eternally present. So, yes. So there's no such false ego. Yeah. The influence of time exhibited by birth, death, etc., up to Brahmaloka doesn't work on the transcendental plane. On the transcendental plane, there are no astronomical influences from demigods. Living entities don't change bodies. They're above even goodness. No false ego. Prabhupada says false ego is something like a moth falling into fire. Captivated, comes to enjoy the fire, but the fire consumes him. So on the transcendental plane, there's no such false ego. Rather, pure consciousness directs him to surrender to the Lord. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, all this indicates that in the transcendental state, or he concludes the paragraph actually by saying, all this indicates that in the transcendental state, there's neither material creation nor the causal ocean for material nature. So then there is a second paragraph. So this is all factual, and it's revealed in the transcendentalists' knowledge of the advanced state of pure consciousness. And again, Prabhupada contrasts the impersonalists and the devotees and their goals. They have different goals. Devotees develop spiritual body for devotional service. Impersonalists don't get a spiritual body, just a spiritual spark in the bodily rays of the Lord. That's what they attain. That's what they can attain. So many just fall down, though, after some time. And Prabhupada says, the Lord is the full-fledged form of eternity, bliss, and knowledge, but the formless Brahma Jyoti is simply eternity and knowledge. So, yeah, Vaikuntha also has forms of eternity, bliss, and knowledge, and devotees get such bodies. So there's no difference, because that's the goal of the devotees, to be absorbed in devotional service like that. So the Lord's abode, name, form, etc., they're of the same transcendental quality, different from the material world. In Bhagavad Gita, Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga are described, but one can reach Vaikuntha by Bhakti Yoga only. The other two can't help with that. They just take you to the Brahma Jyoti. Verse 18, the transcendentalists desire to avoid everything godless, for they know that supreme situation in which everything is related with the Supreme Lord Vishnu. Therefore, a pure devotee who's in absolute harmony with the Lord does not create perplexities, but worships the lotus feet of the Lord at every moment, taking them into his heart. Yeah, we get some really long purports here. So, Prabhupada mentions in Bhagavad Gita several times what Krishna calls Mad Dham, the abode of the Lord, my abode. Yeah, is mentioned a number of times, several times in Bhagavad Gita. And there's no need for sun, moon, electricity. The planets in the abode of the Lord are self-illuminated. So the pure devotees, they're in harmony with the Lord. They don't care for anyone else, even up to Brahma. No interest in impersonalism or in what is spiritual, what is not. And they're not interested in obscure speculations, just in serving the Lord. But Prabhupada makes the point, there are also pseudo-devotees interested in merging. And they wrongly manufacture their own way of devotional service, sometimes by open debauchery. And they mislead others who are simpletons, just fools, or who are debauchees like themselves, which means also just fools. So they're all duratmas. They're all duratmas. Crooked souls in the guise of Mahatmas, all these pseudo-devotees. So Prabhupada concludes the paragraph by saying, such non-devotees and debauchees are completely excluded from the list of transcendentalists by the presentation of this particular verse by Shukadev Goswami. Okay, so now there's a second paragraph. The Vaikuntha planets are the supreme residential places, Parampadam. Brahma Jyoti is sometimes also called Parampadam because it's the rays of the Vaikuntha planets. So it's got a connection, although it's not exactly the same. So Brahma Jyoti rests on the Lord, everything rests on it. So directly or indirectly, everything rests on the Lord, either directly or indirectly. So, but devotees don't waste their time discriminating between what is Brahman, what is non-Brahman. They know the Lord is interwoven in everything. And so everything is the property of the Lord. Therefore, the devotee tries to engage in devotional service. Prabhupada states at the end of the purport, in everything the devotee sees the Lord, and he sees everything in the Lord. The specific disturbance created by a duratma, or crooked soul, is due to illusion, is due to his maintaining that the transcendental form of the Lord is something material. So that's illusion. Verse 19. By the strength of scientific knowledge, one should be well situated in absolute realization and thus be able to extinguish all material desires. One should then give up the material body by blocking the air hole through which stool is evacuated with the heel of one's foot, and by lifting the life air from one place to another in the 6 primary places. So, okay. So, Prabhupada mentions, you get many Duratmas who just, to fool the people, they say they've realized themselves as Brahman, but still they're unable to conquer material desires. And, this contradicts Bhagavad Gita chapter 18, verse 54, which says that the self-realized have no material desires, because such desires are based on false ego, which is exhibited when one tries to overcome material nature and desires to lord it over nature. So when one feels like that, this makes one attracted to material science, to challenge the power of the Lord. Of course, you get devotees who are interested in science in order to challenge the scientists, but those who are on the material platform, who are attracted to material science, and they have desires based on false ego, they oftentimes try to challenge the power of the Lord through their material science. So anyone who's well situated understands that Krishna is the Supreme Brahman and that the soul is part of him, and therefore we must cooperate with him as servant to the served. And there's a second paragraph here. So what is the process for the yogi as described? Sitting in a certain way, extinguish all material desires, give up the material body by blocking the ear hole. Yeah. So Prabhupada says previously this was common, but the situation was more suitable. But in Kali Yuga, you can't do that. So what do? Just chant Hare Krishna. Let's just see if we can do one more verse. Let's do one more verse, verse 20. The meditative devotee should slowly push up the life air from the navel to the heart, from there to the chest, and from there to the root of the palate. He should search out the proper places with intelligence. So, 6 circles. There are 6 circles of the movement of the life air. And the intelligent yogi should find those places with intelligence and meditation. Yeah. These are different. Among these, Prabhupada says, among them, there is the Swadhisthana chakra, or the powerhouse of the life air. Then above that, just below the abdomen and navel, is the Manipuraka chakra. When upper space is further searched out in the heart, one reaches the Anahata chakra, and further up, when the life air is placed at the root of the palate, one reaches the Vishuddhi chakra. So these are 4 of the 6 circles of movement of life air. Yes. Okay, so there you go, devotees. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.